Farming is worth millions to Norfolk's economy, but what does the future hold for the country's farmers after Brexit? Good evening. More than 100,000 people are employed in farming in Norfolk and Suffolk, growing about 20% of the UK's vegetables and rearing about a quarter of all the pigs we eat. But it's a sector that's facing huge changes in the next 18 months as we leave the EU. European farming subsidies will end, and some farmers have already reported a shortage of workers. So what's the likely impact of Brexit on farming in Norfolk? Here to talk about this is Andrew Spinks from North Walsham Young Farmers and Jon Duffy from Anglia Farmers. Also with us this evening, Joe Mitchell, who's a farmer from East Norfolk, and Tim Woodwood from the Country Land and Business Association. So let's start by asking you, I'll start with Andrew, what are the key challenges you're facing at the moment?
From my perspective, I think I'm really worried about a level playing field in terms of animal welfare going forwards, and also opportunities for my enterprise to progress.
And what are people,
young farmers?
What are people saying to you, Jon Duffy, about the challenges in the industry right now?
I think the challenges at the minute can be summarised with one word, which is uncertainty. Any business needs certainty, and agriculture that's no different. So whether you're a business like Anglia Farmers supplying farmers or you're actually running a farm, I think to be able to plan, to be able to invest, I think you do need a bit of certainty. And obviously now we have almost a two-year window where there is a large degree of uncertainty.
We're not going to get much in the short term, are we, Joe Mitchell? Are you worried about this as well?
Yes, I'm very concerned at the moment that we're living in a bit of a bubble where because the currency and some what's happening abroad is what we're getting for our produce is creeping up. It's getting relatively high. However, our production costs have been been post or pre-Brexit cost levels. So when it comes to the future, with what's happened to currency now, is the costs that's now going to start creeping up, and the margin which we're making in between, I don't believe it's going to be there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Tim, what are you worried about at the moment?
Well, our members are saying much the same as has been said already. It's the uncertainty factor. We don't know where we're going to be. We're pleased that there's been an agriculture bill come in, which is a first positive step, and there's an immigration bill which may address the migrant labour issue, which we'll come on to. But it's the uncertainty, as Jon said, it's the difficulty in planning ahead. You're planning. We know there are going to be payments continuing till at least 2020, but that's not much certainty, really. And
planning ahead is what farmers really need to do more than anyone else, I guess.
And particularly in this region where it's so susceptible to weather. I mean, arable farming is it's primarily susceptible to weather. Sheep carries on eating whether it's raining or not, but your crops may not grow.
Okay. Well, the Norfolk show last week was an opportunity for farmers to get together and talk about some of the issues facing them after Brexit. Also at the show was the new Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Secretary Michael Gove, who spoke to us about the concerns that farmers were sharing with him.
Money is issue one. Issue two is labour. People want to have a guarantee that they'll be able to secure the labour that they need in order to make sure that our rural economy keeps growing. And one of the things I'm determined to do is to make sure that as we fashion a new migration policy, that the needs of agriculture and the rural economy are at the heart of it. And I think the third thing that I would mention is just the opportunities provided by new trading arrangements. Farmers recognise that as we leave the European Union, there are opportunities because of the high quality produce that the United Kingdom is famous for, and Norfolk in particular is noted for. There is an opportunity to sell more abroad, but we also need to make sure that as we do sell abroad, that we do not compromise high environmental or animal welfare standards.
Michael Gove there, and one of the things he mentioned was the workforce. The National Farmers Union says there was a 17% shortfall in migrant workers for fruit and vegetable farms in May. Is that what you're hearing and noticing?
Yes. Number of our members have said that staff have already gone home.
Why are they going?
Well, I think it's something to do with the value of the pound as much as anything. It's not so much the uncertainty over Brexit. That must play a part. But they can earn now a lot more back in Eastern Europe or wherever they've come from than they could previously.
Is it about racism? I mean, do people just not feel happy and safe here after Brexit? Does that make a leap too far, maybe?
I think that's a leap far too far. I think it's a leap far too far. I think one of the things I'm very proud about being in this industry is I come across very, very little racism, and I don't think that racism plays a part.
Okay. Have you noticed any difference in terms of workforce and in your area?
No, I do. I talking to somebody yesterday, and I do know that there was a Bulgarian guy, and he's gone home. But maybe that's a certain amount of family. But I haven't noticed it much yet. But I'm sure that it must come. Yes.
And what about from your perspective? You're a family farm, so you don't really have this problem, I guess.
No, we're a true family farm. We've got myself, my brother, and my parents who are on farm with me, and so we're not relying on any extra labour. However, businesses in our areas, we've got a large salad producer in the area and a large fruit business in the area, and they are crying out for people at the moment. I think at the moment there's about 1,500 vacancies for people to come and pick fruit this year, and it's concerned that if we can't get it now, are we going to get it in the future?
There's some interesting developments in mechanisation now, isn't there? Because I think I saw a strawberry picking robot the other day, which is potentially an opportunity to cover that. But
it's not help, is it? I mean, the country is at full employment. I mean, what are we? We're 5% unemployed, which I think is structurally probably about as low as it will get. So we are at full employment. So agriculture is having to compete with everybody else for labour. Now there's two issues with labour. There's permanent labour and making sure you get that permanent labour coming into the marketplace, and then there's the seasonal labour. I think as far as permanent labour goes, agriculture's got a job to do to make sure that it's selling itself as a great career, which I think it is starting to do. Seasonal labour, I think you do need government help. I mean, it's interesting that Gove was talking about that, and when I spoke to him, I did get the impression that he would be willing to look at some sort of seasonal scheme, and I hope they get that in place sooner rather than later, or at least starts to signal the fact that that is what they want to do.
Which we used to have, of course. We used to have a SAWS, as it was called, Seasonal Agricultural Workers Scheme, and I'm not old enough to remember how it worked really, but I mean, I think presumably it did work perfectly successfully. We had fruit picking and we had hop picking and so on in this country. So let's resuscitate.
I think what it does, it also highlights how important colleges like Easton and Otley College are in providing the future workforce for us. I know we've got the universities for the higher managers who want to pursue that type of course, but grassroots agriculture courses from which Easton can offer it's crucial.
Good
to us.
routine.
And also just tying into that, we've got to make sure that the students can actually get to the college, so it's making sure things like the rural transportation routes are all in place.
We'll talk some more about that soon, but one of the key things that farmers have had as a support mechanism from the EU over the last 55 years has been the Common Agricultural Policy, or CAP, a system of subsidies and other programmes. Charles Whittaker from land consultants Brown & Co says Brexit is a concern for farming as an industry.
I think for agriculture it's a real concern. I think agriculture is one of the industries that's going to be hardest hit, we feel, simply because the Common Agricultural Policy under the European Union represents 3/4 of the net farm income of UK farmers, and that we think is going to disappear to the end of the current Parliament is the guarantee we're being given, and whether that's a year, 2 years or 5 years obviously is anybody's guess at the moment, the way politics are. But that's a big concern. So yes, I think we are fully focused on encouraging our long-standing clients and new people who want to talk to us about, okay, what does it mean for their business? We have a product called Fit for the Future. To discuss with farmers, big and small, family farming business particularly, okay, where are we going to be in 5 or 10 years and how is that going to affect your business? And what can we do about it so that we handle that transition in a positive, proactive way rather than waiting and doing nothing.
Charles Whittaker there. Now, he says that the Common Agricultural Policy accounts for 3/4 of net income for farmers. That sounds like a huge amount. Is he right?
Yeah.
Does it sound about right?
Absolutely. It's a core part of our bottom line, and should come post-Brexit, if we lose half of that, I think that a vast majority of UK farmers may go under. Possibly go under. I don't know.
What do you get it for?
Hopefully it'll be then up.
For somebody who doesn't know, sorry to interrupt, but what do you get it for?
Well, we get it for managing the land in a certain way. So we get paid to make sure that we keep our tractors away from the hedges, make sure we cut the hedges at the right time of year and not too often as well. And if you want to then enhance this, you can then go into the stewardship schemes, which you can then really go weird and wacky with putting pollen and nectar mixes in and wild bird seed mixes. And it's then great for the environment. And perhaps in the future, that is the way we're going to see agricultural support.
But is this as a worry for the future that the CAP will go?
I think, well, I suspect, unfortunately, that there won't be as much money as there is at the moment because everybody's competing. It comes back to the uncertainty point we were making earlier. And what we want to see as an organisation is that there is enough, it's a fully costed system and it's fully thought out, and it's there to ensure that we continue to have a vibrant and flourishing agricultural and rural economy rather. And I think that's the concern. It's how much money, and we don't really know. And it is an opportunity as well, because there is the opportunity to look at EU regulations. We know that they're going to transport, the reform bill is going to transport everything lock, stock and barrel into legislation. But there's a lot of EU legislation affecting agriculture in the countryside, which frankly we could probably do away with. I'm slightly sticking my neck on the block here.
But if we go to trade with the EU,
well, maybe.
Are we still going to have to be abide by all this
that's one of the
regulations?
Exactly, that's one of the uncertainties, isn't it? We don't know.
A quick word over here.
Undoubtedly, with Brexit or without Brexit, the amount of support was going to come down. I think that was a direction of travel that Europe was going in. I think Brexit will speed up that process. So I think the amount of support will undoubtedly will speed up. At the same time, I think Europe will also they'll continue to cut their amount of support. What needs to happen is that UK farming, regional farming, needs to get fit for the future. So I think there is an opportunity now where any farming business can start to control the things it can control. Its cost of production, labour, whatever it may be, mechanisation, investments, whatever it may well be. The second part to that is we've got to make sure that, the one thing we haven't spoken about yet is availability of trade. And we've got to make sure that we have access to markets. Because I do believe that we are a very efficient, we're a very professional industry. We can compete on the market, provided we have level playing fields. What we don't want is our sort of import tariffs, export taxes.
Yeah. and we'll talk about some of the solutions, but we must take a break. Do stay with us. We'll be back very shortly. Welcome back. Tonight we're talking about farming and Brexit, after the government announced a new agriculture bill to help farmers deal with the UK's transition out of the EU. On the panel this evening, cattle farmer Andrew Spinks and Jon Duffy from Anglia Farmers. Also with us this evening, Joe Mitchell, who farms in East Norfolk, and Tim Woodwood from the CLA, which represents landowners and rural businesses in England. Well, the government's new agriculture bill will have to address the issue of farming subsidies. Environment Minister Michael Gove say they've got to plan it carefully to make sure it works.
Subsidy, if it's applied in the wrong way, can actually make farmers less productive. So because some other countries have subsidy systems, that doesn't necessarily mean they're as productive as we can be. So it's about getting support right, designing the system in the right way. And the second thing is that when we're thinking about competition abroad, what we can compete best on is quality. The critical thing about British farm produce is that in a world where provenance matters more, where people want to know the journey from farm to fork in intimate detail, Britain is in a very strong position because of the high environmental and animal welfare standards that we maintain.
Michael Gove there. So he talks about farms being sometimes less productive under subsidies. How would you like to see it work?
I think he's probably right. I would like to see it so that we are purely providing public goods, so we're doing the environment and all that sort of stuff, and the actual farming is something that we do on a free market basis. Well, not free market, but market basis.
Jon Duffy, what do you think could be reformed about the system?
The system does need reform. I think it needed reform prior Brexit. We need an agriculture that is efficient, that is professional, that is well resourced, and is profitable. It needs to be profitable and make sure that we reinvest in that. We also need to make sure that we look after the environment. Now, I believe at the minute that we probably are not concentrating enough on that profitability, on that production, on making sure that we are world beaters when it comes to the production. I think we're actually very good at some of the environmental stuff. Now, a lot of that is led through legislation, and I think probably the support still needs to go to some of that legislation. And maybe farmers still do need support in order to carry out some of the environmental goods that are given back to the community. But I would love to see farming done on a basis where farmers are rewarded for being profitable, for being good, for being proficient, for being productive. And I think then we will come out of this fairly well.
But some people might say, well, actually, why should we be paying farmers to be productive when, that's their job?
I think the marketplace should pay them to be productive. I think the marketplace should pay for that. It's the environmental controls that because farmers don't have to have their strips on the edge of the fields. They don't have to look after wildflowers, to look after the bees and whatever else. And if they're doing that, which is a public good, they should be paid for it.
Okay, gentlemen over here. How would you like to see it change and reform?
Yeah, I'm going to echo what Andrew said, and I think it's going to be very difficult to sell to the public a direct payment scheme which we receive at the moment. I think payments are going to go down the route of the agri-environment schemes, so you get paid to do certain things for the environment, whether it be for bees, for hedges, for the birds, and I think that will be a lot easier to sell to the taxpayer.
And taxpayers are shoppers, and they're going to be worried about how much their food costs, because it's already gone up, hasn't it, since the Brexit vote?
I entirely agree with everything everybody said, disappointingly for you, because we're not going to have an argument. But I think, yes, that there is a public image problem in some cases with farmers and large landowners being paid sums of money for what appears to be just owning a piece of land, which clearly can't be right. So I agree with the others, and we would like to see some sort of contract whereby you are paid in return for delivering public goods, which could be food security, it could be environmental issues, it could be water retention, it could be water storage, and so on. And I think that's the way ahead. It's got to be like that.
What happens if that kind of payment isn't there, though? Will farmers be able to cope?
Well, they did in New Zealand.
What happened
controversially? They went through very rough. Well, I
in terms of an environmental perspective.
Exactly. I don't know what effect it had on the environment, but certainly they came through a pretty rough stage.
I think the New Zealand model has always been bandied around, but we're not New Zealand.
No, we're not.
What happened in New Zealand, just briefly?
They basically cut subsidies. I mean, they cut.
They stopped doing it.
Overnight. Overnight, basically, they cut subsidies. But New Zealand is a very, very different country in a very different part of the world. We are next door to one of the largest markets in the world, of which we don't have guarantees over access to that market. New Zealand had access into the Southeast Asian market. So even though they cut subsidies, there was still an available market, and their goods actually were able to flow relatively freely. What the issue we have is we don't know how our goods will flow into Europe and out of Europe. Okay,
well, we've talked about some of the challenges and the uncertainty. So how can farmers deal with the challenges ahead? Let's hear from Charles Whittaker from Brown & Co.
I think the concern is how do we replace that income on most farms that probably represents 60 or 70 or 80% of their profit when the support goes. And several things that we're looking at positively around there in terms of levels of efficiency, pooling resources between farms, increasing scale, precision agriculture, limiting inputs to particularly where they're needed on fields and needed to the plant. Other added value from farming. 20 years ago when we had a fairly serious recession in agriculture for different reasons, diversification was the key word. Whilst it was overused and probably improperly used, I think actually it's very, very relevant now.
So he's talking about diversification. Will you have to look into things like that to survive, do you think?
Yes, making best use of the assets that we have on the farm, yes.
Okay.
The problem with that is that the planning system at the moment doesn't make it easy.
What
it's
way?
something we've lobbied. Well, the trouble is at the moment a lot of local authorities haven't finished their local plans, so that if you're Farmer A here, you can't find what the local authority wants in their local plan in terms of planning, whereas your neighbour half a mile down the road knows because he's in the next local planning authority. So there's no level playing field, to use that awful cliche. So it doesn't make it very easy, and the tax regime doesn't favour it either. So that's another problem.
Okay, and what other things would you be thinking about going forward to try?
We are already we are diversifying from what we're doing from the basically the tractors and cows now. We're planning to add free range hens into our mix now. of course, it's a huge investment for us to do that. Hopefully be able to get some grant funding for that, which I hope long will continue post Brexit. And but all the equipment we get from these, it's all from Europe. It's all based in euros. So since when we first started looking at these projects a year ago, currency's flipped on us, and we've got 20% extra costs already. And that's a hard thing to bite, but.
And is that the experience you're seeing as well, Jon, that people are struggling to diversify because of the currency?
Yeah, I mean, the business I run, which is a farmer cooperative giving inputs to farmers, we do have a part of the business that helps people get grants for the diversification and those sort of things. It is a minor part of the business, but I'd rather concentrate on some of the things. Yes, diversification, of course it will work, and if you can get a steady income stream and it's a good business model, of course farmers should do it. The trouble a lot of farmers have, if going back to some of the other things they can do, is on their own, they're fairly weak. They're weak buyers, they're weak sellers. What farmers need to do is realise that collectively they're way more powerful, and the sensible ones and the ones that are thinking ahead are starting to realise that they do need to club together. They do need to market their goods more effectively and in a more collaborative way, and they do need to buy their inputs in a more collaborative way.
Okay.
And I think we're starting to see a trend towards that way.
Okay, we've only got a couple of minutes left. We've talked about what farmers can do. What should government be doing now to help you in the future?
I would really like government to, from a young farmer's perspective, I think there could be so many more barriers broken down to allow young farmers to come up through the industry and make a real difference. When you're in your 20s and 30s, you've got the energy there to do stuff. We need the Mark Zuckerbergs of agriculture to come up, and I think they can do a lot to break some barriers down.
Okay, what else could government be doing?
I think we'd like more certainty. We'd like to know where the trade negotiations are going to go. I think we all want access or some kind of free trade access into Europe. After all, 7 out of the 10 highest places where we export to are in Europe. So we have to have that access, and if we can do what we can as farmers or as an industry to help that along the way, I think that'd be
I'd entirely agree with that. It's certainty, it's new entrance to the profession, as Jon was saying. It's certainty in the planning system so that if you want to diversify, you can do so more easily than you can now. With all those things in place and access to markets, I think it would be a more rosy picture.
But realistically, are we going to get very much certainty in the next 18 months?
Well, I don't know. I think we need to keep on pushing for certainty. I think one thing that Gove needs to do is make sure that agriculture is high up the agenda in DEFRA, and that DEFRA is high up the agenda in the Brexit negotiations. And I think one thing the government absolutely needs to do is start listening to the industry, start talking to the industry, and listen to the industry more than it does or has done historically, than listen to single issue groups. Because I think this industry is a wonderful industry. It employs an awful lot of people. It creates a huge number of jobs. It nourishes people. It feeds people. We do need to be listened to, and I think if Gove and his team listen to agriculture, the chances are they'll come up with the right solutions.
Okay,
I think Michael Gove, could be a brilliant Secretary of State for Agriculture, because he's got the presence. He's a big hitter out there, and I think he will do a good job.
Yeah. Okay, we'll have to wait and see, won't we? Thank you all for taking time to talk to us this evening. If you'd like to add your comments to the debate, you can contact us. We're on Facebook @Mustard TV. We're also on Twitter @Mustard This Week. But until next time, good night.